So I decided quite early on that I wanted to specialize. So I started to work with people with mental health issues. I started to work with people who had substance abuse and misuse issues. And then I started to work with kids who had been expelled from school because I was expelled from school myself. I started to work with young offenders and people who had young men that had tried to commit suicide. And I just followed all of my fascinations, and just tried my best to work out how it was possible to apply the yogic science of self-awareness, self-discipline, self-healing, and self-love.
What you just heard is Amir Jaan, who is a yoga instructor who has spent the last few decades working with people from all backgrounds. Hey everyone, welcome to Birth. I'm Ash. Thank you for joining us. I want to keep going in part 2 to take you into an Eastern tradition known as Kundalini Yoga. And Amir explains that it's based around 5 principles that are meant to edify both the body and the soul. Let's listen in. You teach something that's far more popular in probably Hinduism cultures and maybe some Buddhist cultures and Eastern cultures, and that is Kundalini. And I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, well, it is one of the oldest methods of healing yoga, if you like. I mean, all yoga is healing, and all yoga has merits based on its particular focus of disciplines. One of the things that creates a distinction between Kundalini yoga and the other classical forms of yoga is that it incorporates all 5 of the major tenets of yogic science into almost every sequence, whereas some of the other classical forms focus more on one particular aspect, such as posturing or breathing or mantra or meditation, whereas in Kundalini yoga we incorporate all of the major tenets of yogic science into every sequence. The sequences are very particular. They've been designed in a very particular way after many thousands of years of observation about the nature of the spiritual and the physical anatomy and the way in which they work together. Some people are focused primarily on the body because it's where all the sensation of life exists, like all the sensuality of life happens in the body, and all the kind of forces that are very present in every moment happening, in where the locality of your body is, whether that's heat or cold or pleasure or what's perceived as pain or any of the polarities, any of the polar opposites that that are holding life together in that kind of very sentient way. In every person, the origin, the root of the actual experience is conscious. It is in the way in which we are aware and perceive those experiences. And that is the essential thing for me. That is the primary thing. It's not, for me, it's not chicken or egg. That is it is top down in that sense. It is like a figure of 8. That's probably the best way for me to think about it. The transcendental kind of awareness. I want to call it the vertical conversation, the conversation that happens between the visible you and the invisible you. Okay, in our tradition we call it the force of forces. Okay, that invisible force that animates the body, that thinks, that makes decisions, that choices, that chooses how to respond, what to, when to, how much to, so on. But that invisible force, that force of consciousness, which is animating the physical instrument, is the primary thing. And it's most important that we're able to recognize that and to establish that awareness and to be able to operate based on that understanding. Because then when we're able to actually, like I was mentioning before, to take the reins of that kind of, I'm calling it wild, but another word for wild is free, sauvage, okay? This kind of wild spirit horse of the mind. Okay? When we're able to kind of take the reins through breath work, actually, then we start to have a much more kind of authentic, beautiful expression through the body of the way in which we express that transcendental conversation on the horizontal plane in relationship with each other. So there is this kind of vertical figure of 8, okay, which is the information coming, the incoming data that comes into the body through the senses, through the actual physical theater, how that gets transmitted into the, the kind of the deep field of consciousness or the superficial field of consciousness. It has to go through the layers, and then what information comes back and generates the response. And that response is how we project on the horizontal plane. When we're able to cultivate consistently the habit of strengthening our these kind of like valuable tools, like sharpening these tools by consistent practice and kind of clearing, cleaning, practicing, it's like any craftsman. Okay, if you want to become a master craftsman, okay, you have to really be very skillful with the tools. When you have very sharp tools, okay, one of two things can happen. You can either create a masterpiece or you can create a bloody mess, actually, quite easily. If you have a sharp knife in your hand, one of two things will happen. Mm-hmm. Okay, you will either create a masterpiece or you will create a mess. Okay, and it's entirely about how present you are to the fact that you have very sharp tools in your possession or in your hand. And the disciplines of Kundalini yoga, and I'll just tell you what the 5 major tenets are. They are breathing, okay, so pranayama, breathing, mudras, hand mudras, like very specific hand gestures, essentially because the hands are in constant correspondence with the brain. And whenever we work with the hands, we really work with the brain. Okay, and the brain is like the kind of main computer, if you like. So if you want to have influence over the main computer, there is a whole complete yogic science of how to kind of stimulate and regulate the brain function by manipulating hand gestures, rhythmic and static asanas, positions, body postures. And we use body locks, which includes suspending the rhythm of the breath and condensing the oxygen into different aspects of the anatomy, depending on how we tense up the muscles in the body. And meditation, like the focused attention of the mind. When you're able to kind of practice and create a degree of control or mastery, ultimately in the end, over these kind of basic and primary functions in the body, because human beings are creatures of habit, it becomes our habit to express that control in our daily life and routines. That for me is the great benefit. And I have had the great privilege over the course of many, many, many moons and sitting with many, many people to see that it works for everyone every time. The actual direct translation of the word Kundalini from Sanskrit to English means the coiled lock of hair of the beloved. Okay? And yes, it has been kind of
simplified.
The symbology.
Too simplified.
Yes, but that coil, anything that's coiled up has like a spring or a snake or a lock of anything, has a lot of latent potential in it. Okay? And when you unleash, when you uncoil, when you unravel, when you unload that latent potential from anything which is coiled up, it starts to expand. A human being is made up of 2 essential kind of qualities or characteristics. One is animal, because human being, the physical instrument, is still part of the animal kingdom. And we have animal instincts, very primal instincts to survive, to procreate, and to accumulate kind of things that make us feel safe, like food, clothes, and shelter. And these are the very basic primal instincts of every animal, and even including human beings. And so we are still subjected to those primal instincts, and they are really primal. They're the first ones. And when things get really hard, they're normally the things that human beings revert to. Is this instinct to survive, the instinct to procreate, and the instinct to accumulate more things that kind of support that feeling safe and secure. But there is also an angelic nature to the human condition, which is dreamlike and completely free. And yeah, they work together. Okay, they work together. And so we have to not deny any aspect of ourselves in that sense. And then once we can stabilize, actually, once we can make friends and we can stabilize the animal nature, it gives us the opportunity, the platform to ascend into the angelic nature with much more consistency. Because the angelic nature is also always there. But, when basic instincts are at play, like survival. And most people, because of the conditions of society and economic structure and the way that society has reached this evolution, is that most people are still dealing with survival instincts. They're still having to pay rent from week to week. They're going from, paycheck to paycheck, and they're just trying to survive. They're trying to support their family. They're trying to take care of basic things like food, clothes, and shelter. And so when you're predominantly, preoccupied with survival, the angelic nature is kind of on the back burner. But when you somehow manage to either reorganize your perception or to make the decisions that bring that kind of basic and primal self into a kind of stable place, then the higher gates, the upper gates, start to become available for you.
The angelic is almost always there. It's existent. It is a holy thing to.
It is always there.
But it's a matter of your mind doesn't typically have the space really to. In survival mode, it doesn't take time for the space to be able to sort of open up that awareness. And so then you sort of come across the thing where, yes, what this person is doing in their survival mode is holy because this is what they're made to be able to do. Like there's an element of holiness and sacredness in our instincts, but it's when you come into the awareness of it that it becomes far more meaningful and sort of taps into sort of the angelic or celestial side of our existence.
Yeah, for me, it's really about higher level of communication, and yes, this is also completely and utterly innate, and it is being expressed either consciously or unconsciously at all times through compassion and empathy and the natural instinct to love. We love our pets, we love our families, we love our parents, we love our children. And the nuclear family for me is like an opportunity for everyone to experience unconditional love. I know that nuclear family can also be a place which appears to be a very uncomfortable theater in which to experience love, but there is always some degree of love there, and where other people need us and the gifts and the tools that we have. So in the nuclear family, we have this opportunity to experience unconditional love. And then if we can recognize that and we can stabilize that, then it gives us the opportunity to move outwards in concentric circles, from our inner circle of friends, kind of soul family that we do choose, and outward from there to anyone and everyone and everything, including, animals, the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, nature, the ecosystem, the whole thing. And that's when it starts to become this kind of higher form of communication for me.
I hope that this podcast was informative for you, that you found something in it for you, and that you might be interested in learning more. So I will put Amir's information in the show notes, as well as the 5 principles that he speaks about. You can also find him on social media and find out when he's conducting live sessions and other ways to participate with his community. Thank you for being with us, and may you live and move and have your being. Cheers.